Hi, it's Natalie Rose, and welcome back to Wake Up, the channel that helps you think less about food in your body and more about truly living. Today, we're talking about something that I see all the time, but often isn't discussed enough, or at least it's hard to find clear answers. We're talking about missing periods, and not just in the context of fertility. There are emotional, physical, and mental consequences of losing your cycle. And if you've ever asked yourself, am I eating enough to get my period back, or felt unsure whether to count calories to figure it out, then this episode is for you. We're also going to be talking about how to stop mentally calorie counting if that is something that you struggle with, constantly doing the mental math of foods in your head or getting freaked out by calories on menus, then this episode is for you. We're going to unpack why your period is a key marker for your health, how to approach recovery and healing without obsessing over numbers, and we're going to offer some practical tips for letting go of mental calorie counting so that you can heal fully, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. Today, I will be chatting with Lindsay Lusson, who is a registered dietitian who specializes in disordered eating and fertility. She has both personal and professional experience in hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA, or period loss, related to overexercise and undereating. Her own experience led her to become passionate about educating and empowering others to advocate for their health and take charge of their fertility through proper nutrition. She has helped hundreds of women recover from HA and over 200 get pregnant and take home healthy babies. All right, let's get into it.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to reconnect with you. I think we met a couple years ago. Maybe the first time we met was that when I was on your podcast.
Yes, I think that was beginning. It must have been beginning of 2023 because I feel like we've connected since then. So
definitely,
it couldn't have just been a year ago, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And then you came on as a guest in my community, which was so helpful. Yeah. And we cross-referred clients to each other as well. And I know that, there have been many clients who have had such great success, which brings me into, do you want to just give a brief introduction to what you do and how you help women and maybe just a little bit of your background story?
Yeah, totally. Happy to. You want me to just jump right in?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So I've been a registered dietitian for 14 years, kind of worked in a variety of different places, but kind of found my way into the fertility space when 2017, I was ready to get pregnant, but was kind of forced to face the truth that I hadn't had a cycle in over a decade. My missing period was a result of struggling with an eating disorder for almost a decade. But I was one of those several women who struggle with eating disorders who never really looked sick. And so when I wasn't getting my period, it was always this major mystery to pretty much every doctor that I saw. So in 2017, I had been off the pill for 9 months, hadn't had a period, and was ready to get pregnant and was kind of forced with, do I go down this whole fertility treatment route or do I try to see if I can fix this? And I had watched a close friend of mine struggle with infertility and IVF for close to 3 years. So I feel like I had a awareness for what I was getting into if I were to go that route. And so I started researching and figuring out why my period was missing. I was able to get my period back, go on to get pregnant naturally 3 times. And now that's what I do is I help women all over the world restore their fertility naturally and take home healthy babies.
Wow, that's amazing. I have a lot of questions for you and I wrote them down so that I wouldn't forget because this is just I feel like it's just such a nuanced topic that a lot of people just don't have answers for. One of my questions was just before we go into fertility and things like that, why would you say it's really important to have a regular cycle, even if someone's not ready to pursue having children or they're not ever thinking of having babies? Why is it important to have a regular cycle?
Yeah, what I tell a lot of our clients who aren't yet ready to start their families, because I do think that's a temptation of I'll figure that out when I'm ready to get pregnant. And the fact of the matter is it doesn't usually end up being that easy for people. And if you're still battling like disordered eating or overtraining, under fueling, whatever you want to call it, because a lot of the women we work with actually don't identify with having an eating disorder. Usually disordered eating is more what makes sense, but even still, not everyone. Is that your cycle matters, and there's a time where you're going to want to transition off the pill and sort of prepare for pregnancy. Of course, there's always those people who like come off the pill and get pregnant immediately, and like it's not a big deal. That's not everyone's story. And so thinking about kind of preparing your body for pregnancy, and even beyond that, let's say you want to start your family in like 5 years. So you're like, okay, I'll be thinking about that. Let's say somebody's listening and like they're in their 20s and they're like, well, I mean, I get my period every once in a while, like, no big deal. We are actually designed to have a regular, so kind of 25 to 35-ish day cycle every single month. We are also designed to ovulate every single month. And why ovulation matters, even outside the context of pregnancy, is we need that monthly rise and fall in progesterone for mood balance. So a lot of women who aren't ovulating regularly might be struggling more with anxiety. They might be struggling with depression. They might be, quicker tempered. So we see that too as progesterone kind of starts to, sometimes even people who are ovulating regularly aren't making enough progesterone to get pregnant. So I would say that too, if you're thinking about starting your family, maybe the next 3 years or so, start tracking your cycle, start transitioning off birth control, because even if you're getting your period every single month, your cycle may not be healthy enough for pregnancy. We work with a lot of those clients as well. Beyond the mood piece, progesterone also plays a role in bone metabolism. So a lot of women that have struggled with missing or irregular periods are at a higher risk for osteoporosis and osteopenia. And essentially the best way to build and maintain bone mass, even if you've lost bone mass and you're working on recovering bone mass, is to have regular ovulatory cycles. So if you're bleeding, every 30 to 60 to 90 days, but you aren't actually ovulating, you're kind of missing one of the key components that's needed to maintain healthy bone mass. And then the other one I would say is just cardiovascular health. So there's some pretty strong linkage between low estrogen and increased risk for heart disease. Women who have missing or irregular period have a higher increase in potentially having heart attacks at young age once we move past 50. So these are all kind of future things. I mean, I would say the immediate things are bone mass and mood, and then the more like as you get into your 30s, 40s, 50s are the fertility piece and the cardiovascular things.
Yeah. And it's so hard to think about the future consequences. Like when you're really struggling or you're really stuck in your patterns or you're afraid of weight gain, it's hard to think, okay, this could be having really serious impacts on my bone health and my heart health in the future. How do you navigate that with clients? Clients who either haven't had their period for a while, whether or not they, are pursuing pregnancy now or want to in the future. How do you navigate that fear of weight gain?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that in a weird way, most women sort of have this sixth sense, this kind of innate feeling that like something is wrong, like something is off with your body. I've heard it described and kind of felt this way personally, that like you always kind of know, right? If you're suppressing your weight or if it's not natural, if it's really hard for you to maintain your weight. And I think for most people who are finally ready to get support, they start to kind of recognize how much work is, or like how at odds it is with what they would want to be doing. So like the true values of, is you spending 2 to 3 hours a day exercising to maintain a body? Is that a good use of your time? Like in a perfect world, like if you didn't have to do that, like would you keep doing that? And so kind of, recognizing that the time and the energy spent to maintain that body size, that may not be natural for you. And I think most people already know that deep down. And so it's kind of just recognizing that while it's scary to see your body change, number one, your body is going to change. Like no matter how hard you try to control, your body at 16 isn't going to look the same at 66, even if you do diet and overexercise your entire life. So like you're kind of fighting the inevitable. And also to recognizing that the amount of effort that you're putting into doing this is exhausting. And at some point, your body's going to be waving red flags. If it's not a missing period, it might be a stress fracture. If it's not a stress fracture, it might be crazy, horrible GI issues. And so your body can handle this, wake up at 5 a.m., go to the solid core class 7 days a week, follow it up with a 3-mile run. Like it can kind of operate in that way for a very finite amount of time. At some point, your body is going to give out and you're going to kind of be forced with the decision to live with a eating disorder, dive deeper into your eating disorder, or change courses and choose the path of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And sometimes it's not just about physically how you look or the physical weight gain. Sometimes it's about just the unwillingness to give up a routine or that lifestyle that you identify with as being an active person who has to start their day with movement and then go to this class because it's social. Like maybe that's where all their social ties are. And it's become part of this identity. And sometimes some of the symptoms can be like struggling at work because of cognitive deficits, like changes in your memory and your concentration that happen when your hormones aren't flowing well, right? So sometimes, there's such a wide range of symptoms that people can look out for and struggle with.
Definitely. And I think to just piggyback off of some of the things that you said, it's about not necessarily like thinking on it so black and white of, okay, well, if I'm going to choose to get my period back, that means that I'm going to totally throw my health out the window. I'm not going to move my body. I'm not going to care what I look like, because let's be honest, like we don't live in a vacuum. Like women are going to have some level of degree about, feeling concerned about the way that they look. Like that's just a human shared experience that we have. But it might be about like shifting some of those perspectives, right? So we're not saying don't exercise at all, but what if we could shift our routine where we're not working out at 5 a.m., we're working out at a different day so that we're not forcing an overtired body through movement. Maybe we're not going to be pounding it in a Orange Theory fitness class 7 days a week. Maybe we're going to mix in walks in nature, or maybe we're going to be taking yoga classes. And so if somebody really identifies with like, well, I'm just this active person, we don't have to totally like stomp on that part of your personality. It's just about turning the dial down and being open to exploring what else makes you you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what can scare people away from this kind of work, is thinking that they have to completely stop exercise or completely change their whole life or lose their identity. I had another question for you. Are you for calorie counting during period recovery, or are there other approaches that can be used as well? What are your thoughts?
We're usually working with people. So I'll start this way. I totally understand why somebody wants to or thinks they need to count calories to get their period back, because it is a false sense of control, just like weighing yourself every day or trying on the same pair of jeans just to make sure that they still fit, right? It is a false sense of control. The truth of the matter is that no one on the planet, even myself, who has worked exclusively with women for period recovery for the past 6 years, no one on the planet knows the exact amount of food that your individual body needs to recover. We can have some guidelines and we can have a little bit of a ballpark number, but thinking about that number, obsessing about that number, in my practice, I have found to be incredibly counterproductive, because people get very fearful of going over that number. Or if you've struggled with a restrictive eating disorder, you might find yourself being like, well, I'm going to eat just under that number. When in reality, like, we're not allowing our body to decide how much food that it needs. And we're creating more stress around this specific number. So all that to say, I don't think that calorie counting is the best strategy for period recovery or kind of long-term rebuilding trust with your body to be the guide on what's the right amount of food for you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. It's so hard for those who get really stuck on that number and trying to eat just below that, or just having such a strong fear or guilt of going over that number. It's hard to forget a number when it's been planted in your brain like that. Same with weight, being given a goal weight. And that's another thing, is that you don't know what your weight needs to be to regain your period, to restore it. And just because you reach a certain weight where your period comes back, it's not like that's the weight you're supposed to be at for your whole life too. Our weight fluctuates throughout our life. So these numbers can be like a really sticky point for people.
Yeah, definitely a sticky point. We hear that a lot from clients because I would say more often than not, we're working with clients who have already done the work, like they've reached their goal weight. Maybe they've exceeded their goal weight. Maybe they're eating more than they ever have. They're eating,
Yeah.
thousands of calories, and they're like, but it's like, it hasn't worked for me. And then that also creates a lot of stress and frustration because then people start to be like, well, what if it never comes back? I've done all the things. And so I think that focusing on numbers, be it calories, be it weight, be it body fat percentage or whatever, I feel like it starts to focus on the wrong things for a lot of people in recovery and just leads to more stress and frustration than it needs to.
Yeah, which is where the biggest question comes in is like, how do I know if I'm eating enough? How do I know if I'm doing things right? I have some members in my community who haven't struggled with disordered eating for very long, like felt like they ate normally through most of their life. And then just kind of in university or going through a major transition in their life, started to experience some fear around food or just went on like a sugar-free diet because their mom was going on it and then lost their period. And they're like, why is it so hard to get back? Like I wasn't struggling for that long. Now I'm eating more than ever, but I'm not hungry. Like they're trying to listen to their body. Would you say that that's still a sign that they're not eating enough, or where would you go from there?
So eating enough is always really subjective. And I think that it can be really hard to determine what is enough because to some degree it is individual. But also too, when people are thinking about what's enough, they're usually inviting in this element of comparison. Oh my gosh, all the girls I follow on TikTok, I'm eating so much more than them. Surely this is enough for me to recover. So when we talk about enough, it's like enough compared to what or enough compared to who. And so there is some structure that we work in with our clients. We do have registered dietitians who do food log reviews for our clients. And so we can kind of like, our team will discuss on the back end about where things need to be nutritionally, where we might need to shift macronutrients or micronutrients or nutrient timing. But we're usually not communicating that to our clients because that's really stressful. But in order to know, I think the idea of like, how do you know if you're not eating enough, especially if we circle back to the idea of, should you count calories? I think that this is where getting support can be really helpful. I mean, on the one hand, you could always take more of an intuitive eating approach if you have those hunger cues, right? Because if you know you're restricting food and it's like, we'll just go against what the rules and restrictions are, potentially that could allow you to eat enough to get your period back. But what we'll find too is that people have restricted food for so long, especially with the clients that we work with who have done some intermittent fasting, is they literally won't have the hunger cues. So they will, if you can't watch the video on this, intuitively chronically undereat and not provide their body with the right message about energy availability and safety. And so I think that you could plan A, go really deep into your intuitive eating journey, make sure that you're really understanding what kind of led you to lose your period, identifying your food rules, making sure that you're eating consistently and you're including everything, and try to go off hunger. But if that doesn't work for you, you might also need to be working with a registered dietitian who can create some sort of structure and help you to relearn those hunger cues. We don't have to stay here for forever. But to your point, if people have dieted for a long time and their metabolism is slowed down and they're so out of touch with hunger, they're probably not just going to be able to wing it and get their period back.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it doesn't feel intuitive, but you have to have that kind of mechanical eating to be able to eat intuitively again in the future.
Right.
Yeah, that one can be tricky to kind of wrap your head around, but it's true. Sometimes you just need that structure to relearn your body's hunger cues.
And what we often find too is with like a little bit of structure, people will actually find that they're hungrier than they even realize. With a little bit of structure, we can see the return of the hunger cues. We can see the stabilization in blood sugar. And so once people kind of have that, training wheels of structure, it gets a lot easier to actually eat enough. A lot of times people will realize that they've been suppressing hunger once they really start getting into uprooting the things that are preventing them from eating enough.
Definitely. Are there any things that you've seen that negatively impact this process? For example, if someone hasn't had their period in a while and their doctor recommends birth control, so let's say they're not planning on having kids in the near future, is that ever something that you'd recommend to kind of like wake up hormones, or I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Such a good question, because I do feel like sometimes people think of giving supplemental hormones as like a jump start. And the reality is, especially for the birth control pill, is that it actually suppresses your hormones. Now, granted, and somebody who's not cycling, it's going to be giving you a tiny bit of synthetic hormones, and most women will get some sort of cycle and withdrawal bleed on that. But what I think is the most important piece to understand about the pill is it's not actually bringing your period back. You go on the pill and you bleed every single month because your body is giving you a steady dose of estrogen and progesterone, and then you take that away and you have a withdrawal bleed. And so once we come off the pill, we're right back to whatever hormonal pattern we were in with a missing period. It's like kind of tanked out hormones. We're right back to that in less than 30 days. And so giving the pill is not really doing anything. We have several studies that show that the pill doesn't protect against bone loss that's going on when somebody's in a chronic low estrogen state and not getting their period. If anything, I think that the pill can give women a false sense of security that this isn't really an issue when it is. And we have some strong evidence that the pill actually depletes your body of B vitamins, of a couple of other different major minerals that kind of put you at a more depleted state than if you were to have never gone on the pill. On the flip side, hormone replacement therapy, which is very different, it's bioidentical hormones, and it's typically given in a cyclical fashion, like a transdermal estrogen patch, continuously, and then a cyclical progesterone to stimulate. You're kind of stimulating the natural cycle. It's a little bit more of a natural way. And the only reason I even bring that in is if you are in recovery from an eating disorder and your team wants you to do this because you have already crossed over into the osteoporosis category and you're, let's say, 21. This is not a bad thing. Like, this can serve as a good bridge to prevent further bone loss as you're still working on coming out of your eating disorder. But the birth control pill and hormone replacement therapy are two very different things. And I think it's just important that as people are thinking about their options, that they don't use those interchangeably.
Okay, that's so interesting, because I've heard of both, but I didn't know the difference.
I will say, in the close to 400 clients that I've worked with, I've only had one or two that I've actually recommended that to, and really more as a short-term bridge, because the reality is that your body is totally capable of cycling on its own. Mm-hmm. But, like I said, the hormone replacement therapy can be a good bridge for somebody who, for whatever reason, maybe like psychologically isn't there to really ready, like, maybe they're still coming out of their eating disorder. And I mean, this as a therapist, this is like so exhausting. Sometimes you just have to like coast and like maintain. And then when you feel a little bit more stable, dive into kind of the next phase of recovery. And so that's kind of where I could see hormone replacement therapy being, a good bridge for the right person in the right situation.
Yeah. And I mean, even without an eating disorder, it's uncomfortable to be told that you need to eat more when you don't feel like you want to eat more, when it's not intuitive, right? Like, even if someone told me I needed to be eating more right now, I mean, it's kind of a pain in the butt, and it feels counterintuitive. So I can understand why that would be difficult for anyone. So it's good to know about the difference between those two options, because I didn't know that. Another thing, I kind of want to go back to the calorie counting piece of it. And I really wanted to ask you, because you must have clients who may have stopped using MyFitnessPal or tracking calories, but still mentally count calories in their head. What is your experience working with mental calorie counting?
Oh, totally. And I think that some people live in a space where they're like, I'll never be able to not count. Like, I can't get rid of that information. And to a certain extent, it's true. You can't unlearn if an apple has X amount of calories. You can't unhear that, right? But there are ways that we usually push our clients to push past the chronic calorie counting. And there's a couple of different tips that I'd love to share. The first one is to start trying new foods that you don't automatically know the calorie count for. This probably looks like, dining out more often, buying different foods at the grocery store, eating some of your favorite foods. So we're kind of like double whammy, because usually your foods are like higher calorie, higher carb foods that are actually awesome for period recovery and restoring fertility. So inviting in like foods that you don't typically know the information for, allowing someone else to take control of what you're eating. So that might be like letting a partner or a girlfriend pick the restaurant you're eating at. That way, if you're eating at a new restaurant, there's no way you can know what you're really in for. And that can feel really scary. But I do find that like tiny doses of exposure therapy like that can actually be really, really helpful, because you go and you do it. And even if it's super hard and potentially the hardest thing you've ever done, you get through it. And the next time you do it, it's going to be easier. And the next time you do it, it's going to be easier. So I do think that can be really helpful. And then the other thing that we'll encourage our clients to do is to start small, but to challenge themselves to not do it, to break the pattern. Can we eat lunch without pre-calculating the calories beforehand? Can we make it through one single meal without back tallying it? Can we do that for a whole day? Okay, we can do it for a whole day. Could we do 2 days? Could we do 3 days? Could we do a whole week? So we kind of just like dip our toes in on trying to break the compulsion of the habit. And over time, it gets easier. And you could even kind of turn it, because we work with a lot of people who are really competitive, turn it into a little game. Okay, so we did, 3 days in a row where we didn't count calories. Fourth day, we ended up doing it. Amazing. Why don't we start fresh on Monday and let's see if we can beat our record, something like that.
I love that. It's very common in perfectionistic personality types who are competitive and who like that over control, like who like to be in control. That counting the numbers feels like it's just kind of part of their personality to know that things are adding up. Kind of going back to what you said earlier, it's like you don't have to change your whole personality in recovery, right? You can just turn that competitiveness into this piece of like, okay, how many days can I go without giving into the compulsion of counting? So I like that a lot. It's just a loop that your brain has been wired to have. Like you automatically have a thought to count or to know that number. It gives you that sense of control or that sense of certainty, which a lot of our clients are really kind of addicted to, or that's what they feel is like giving them a sense of pride and accomplishment and achievement. And so it can be hard to sort of drop out of that analytical, logical part of your brain into the emotional side of your brain, which is like, did I like this meal? Like, what did it taste like? What were some of the sensations that it brought me? And that's something that I often work with clients, is activating that other side of their brain to help them get to their intuition again. And you can know the calorie information of something, but you can also appreciate that it has all these other qualities that matter. What do you think about also changing kind of what that information means to you? Like if someone has been counting calories because they used to think that that lower calories was better, but now they're actually healing and realizing that that's not the best thing for their body. Do you ever sort of, encourage that side of it too? It's like, well, this information, but it doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, like calorie kind of became like a dirty word, like it was like, oh, calories, So now as a mom of 3 young children, I, try to not like stomp on the idea that like they don't need to know anything about calories, and really just educate on what calories actually are. Like it's a measurement of energy. And so when we talk about something being high calorie, it's not bad. It's not good. It just has more energy than something that's low calorie. And so a way that you could flip the script in, recovery or reframing around I can't get over the fact that, the Starbucks Frappuccino has 400 calories. It's for energy. So if you have a really busy morning and you're not a breakfast person, like why not fuel up the very beginning of your day with something that has more calories so that you have more energy to do the next thing? So I do think that if you can't unlearn the information, you might not be able to. You can kind of start to take the emotion out of, is it good? Is it bad? And it just is. And there could be a productive way to use this. Oh my gosh, I have a really long travel day today, and this is the only opportunity that I know to eat. There's the lower calorie option, there's the higher calorie option. Oh my gosh, if I'm not going to eat for 6 hours, I definitely need to go with the higher calorie option. So I do think that unpacking the beliefs around calorie, high calorie, low calorie, one being good, one being bad, one being healthy, one being unhealthy. And I do think that maybe for the better, we're shifting out of being so calorie focused, or at least that's what I noticed in a lot of the clients in my practice. But there are still several clients that I do think get hung up on that. And so that's a good point as to not necessarily be like, oh, well, just don't think about calories. How can we use this information in a different, more productive, healthy way?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I really don't think about the calories. I have no idea how many calories I'm eating.
I think that it makes it easier to make food decisions too. But as somebody that struggled with chronic calorie counting for years, I will say that, sometimes the information doesn't go away. And so then I think as an intuitive eater, you can make an informed food decision. All right, it is a lower calorie option, and my brain is tempted to be like, that must be healthier. Then I like to kind of tap into the emotional side, like you were talking about, which one tastes better? Which one actually sounds good? If I could close my eyes and think about what would be the yummiest lunch right now, would it be the lower calorie option? And so I think that if you struggle with having that information, it's about using that as maybe several different cues for what sounds good for you in the moment. And in a perfect world, it would be great if you could have some sort of separation for it. I know menus don't really help us out whenever they have the calorie count right there for you. But when you're at a restaurant, I think it can be helpful to, instead of thinking about, oh, should I choose the one with X number of calories, to be like, what was the first thing that popped out to me on the menu? And what actually sounds good versus what has the right information.
Yeah. Yeah. I can agree that seeing calories on menus can be kind of jarring when you're seeing this huge, 4-digit number beside your meal and you're like, oh. And sometimes I think to myself, okay, let's say I am having way more calories today than I usually do. It's going to all balance out in the end anyways. The next day, my body's going to still be sending me signals for what I need and what I want and so it's not necessarily even the end of the world, even if you do choose the higher calorie option, or even if you do go way over what you think you should be eating. Your body is smart, and it's about learning how to trust it again. But that can be really hard when you've been controlling it tightly with these calorie counts for so long.
It's definitely a process, but I totally agree with you that the more that you can learn to trust your body and believe that your body's on your team, the less stress you'll feel about eating something that has a calorie count on it, or something that is a higher calorie food, because you're like, my body's got this. It's going to take all of the nutrients from this food and all the energy from this food. My body is going to use that and metabolize that. And if there's any extra, it's going to store it for later. And that's awesome, because I don't eat like this every day. I probably do need some extra to be stored.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the only way to do that is to stop calorie counting. You kind of have to just let your body do its thing and test out those fears. Like you mentioned with exposure therapy, it took a while for me to realize that nothing drastic happened when I stopped counting calories. In fact, it gave me the opportunity to listen to my body. I'll try to post this as often as I can on Instagram. I try to show real life examples, but a recent example is like having a huge craving for gummies and sugar. And I listened to that craving, as I always do. And I think it was like a day or two later, I had gotten blood work and it showed that my blood sugar levels had actually been low. So that was literally my body telling me I needed more sugar. Or if I get these really strong chocolate cravings, like sometimes this is pre-pregnancy, that, my period is coming. And then my period will come the next day after having like maybe way more chocolate than I normally would have. So it's cool when you get these glimpses of like, oh, my body was just communicating to me. And that was just something I never paid attention to before because I was so insistent on controlling it.
It really is amazing when you can finally move away from that and really recognize how smart your body is. There are going to be times in your cycle, so just bring a little science into this, in your luteal phase after you ovulate, the progesterone increases your body temperature, which also increases your metabolism. So you actually need a couple hundred calories more in your luteal phase than you do in your follicular phase. There's also appetite changes that are tied to the hormone dump that happens right before you get your period. And so when you're craving certain foods or you're feeling hungrier during certain times of the month than you did previously, there's a biological reason for that. And it's really cool when you start to let your body guide you, how you can kind of start to piece that together. But if you're constantly trying to control and manipulate and obsess about, the calories or the numbers or the ingredients, you totally miss out on that.
Yeah. I just feel so bad for everyone who's vulnerable to the misinformation on social media because you hear the complete opposite when you open TikTok, right? And now with like skinny talk, it's like, it's the complete opposite information of what we've been talking about in this whole episode, right? It's like, don't listen to your body. Stop when, there's this amount on your plate or whatever it is. And it just must be so confusing for people. I mean, I know it was confusing for me as well. And I think for me, I've just learned to tune it out because I think the more that you trial and learn with your own body, for me, I'm more confident because I've practiced it for so long. Whereas with others who are struggling with their body image and trying to find a way to fix it, they're more likely to listen to what other people say that they're doing is working for them.
Do you feel like if somebody's in a vulnerable place where they're on a healing journey with food, it probably is helpful to tune out that information? I think there's a time and place, and when you get to a place where you're more able to look at things objectively and not necessarily take everything that you see as truth, then you can allow as much or as little as you want. But I do feel like, when you're in a place where you're just susceptible to believing false information or allowing that information to second guess what your body is telling you, that like turning it off, dialing it back, spending less time, just having some healthy boundaries and barriers can be helpful.
Yes. Which can be so hard. I mean, I'll admit that I get lost on TikTok scrolls. Like, I need to not know my password for that time limit. I need to let someone else make up that password. And then when an hour has gone by and that sign pops up that that's my cue to get off TikTok. But yeah, that's the thing. I mean, social media can be addictive. And then when you're also struggling with your body image or with food, it can be easy to be vulnerable to that information, especially when people are saying, this is what works for me and I'm so happy about it. And I, look good and I feel good. Like it can be so tempting.
Yeah. But I think too, like remembering your own autonomy in the situation, I agree with you. Like I don't have the solution for spending less actual time on social media because I would be the type of person that needs to put my phone in an actual lockbox. But I will say, like when I see like stuff from Skinny Talk pop up, like I will, make sure that I'm, reporting things that I think are not helpful or unhealthy because there's a lot of that out there. Where like on Instagram, you can even do settings where you're like, show me less posts like this, things like that can be really helpful, because remember, the more that you entertain the feed, the more that's going to feed you stuff like that. And so of course, take breaks and things like that, but also to be mindful of what you're filling your feed with. If you are trying to heal your body image, it's probably not the best idea to be following 25 different fitness influencers. So just, understanding that you might be more influenced than you even realize if that's what you're looking at all day long.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that's something that's so important and not talked about enough. I'm not shy with blocking people. Like if something rubs me the wrong way, even though I feel like I'm in a really great place. I mean, I know I am. If something just rubs me the wrong way, I'll block them, because and it gives that information to my algorithm to not show me more of that kind of stuff. I'm just not interested in that topic of discussion or that type of focus on bodies or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. Sometimes I'll find myself following someone temporarily, and then I'll be like, why? Like I'll start comparing, and I'll be like, oh, like I know this, and this is not good for me. So, just unfollow and like just be, having your own self-awareness and bold enough to know that like you're in charge. You don't have to continue to consume content that makes you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for this conversation and for sharing your wisdom, not just scientifically and nutritionally with food and all that stuff is so helpful, but I think it's also so inspiring sharing your story and how giving hope to listeners who probably feel like they've been, round and around with this for so long and might be losing hope. It's just good to know that there's always hope. Your body knows what it's doing. Your body is capable, and it's just about finding your way back to being able to listen and trust your body. Is there anything else you'd like to share for our listeners? And then please let them know how they can find you.
Yeah, definitely. I would just say that understand as you're working on recovering your period, that's part of your story, or going through some sort of infertility journey, that there's always a reason why your body may not be working correctly. And there's unfortunately a huge disconnect between a lot of practitioners and this specific issue. And so remember that your body isn't broken. And we know that your body isn't broken because for most people who are dealing with period loss, they had one and then they lost one. So, okay, we know that your body is capable, and figuring out how to get it to work again is the problem that can be solved. It's a fixable problem. So like, don't lose hope there. And if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about how to recover their period or how to work directly with our team, they can follow me at food.freedom.fertility on Instagram. We're on there regularly. I check my DMs. We have like free trainings and free guides and things like that. So even just getting plugged into some of our freebies can be like a really good start, and maybe helping you recognize what some of those missing pieces might be for you.
Well, thank you so much. I'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.